I'm Lennox Hayes, 32, a pediatric nurse working double shifts at a hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee, raising my 7-year-old son alone after his father walked out 4 years ago. My in-laws never liked me. They made that clear the first Thanksgiving I showed up with their son, a girl from the wrong side of town, with student loans and scrubs that smelled like antiseptic. But I kept showing up, kept being polite, kept bringing my son to their house every Christmas, because I believed family was worth the effort. That belief nearly destroyed me. It started at my brother-in-law's birthday dinner in March. Not a holiday, not even a big event. Just a Saturday night at my mother-in-law's house in Hickson, the kind of dinner where everyone shows up hungry and someone always says something they can't take back. My son had been excited all week. He'd made a card with crayons, his name spelled out in wobbly letters across the bottom. He carried it in his backpack like it was made of glass. We were barely through the door when my sister-in-law looked at him and said, loud enough for the whole living room to hear, "Why did you even bring him? This isn't really his family." She laughed after she said it, like it was a joke. Nobody corrected her. My mother-in-law turned back to the stove. My father-in-law cleared his throat and walked to the other room. My son looked up at me with those eyes, the ones that trust me completely, the ones that didn't understand what she'd just said but knew something was wrong. I felt the room tilt. I'd spent 4 years bringing him here. 4 years of Christmas mornings and Easter baskets and birthday cards he drew himself. 4 years of we're still family from people who apparently didn't mean a word of it. I put my hand on his particular and kept my voice very, very calm. "We're going to remember this," I said to no one in particular. I picked up his backpack. I took his hand. We left. The birthday card sat on their entryway table. I doubt anyone noticed. That night I drove home through the rain, Chattanooga all gray and wet outside the windows, my son asleep in the back seat before we hit the highway. I kept both hands on the wheel. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was thinking I'd been sending my mother-in-law money every month since the divorce. Not because I had to. There was no legal obligation, but because my ex-husband had asked me to before he disappeared entirely, said his parents were struggling, said it would help keep peace. $700 a month. For almost 3 years. I'd done the math once and stopped because the number made me sick. I was working nights and weekends, eating rice and beans twice a week, telling my son we couldn't go to the aquarium yet because of the budget. And I was sending $700 a month to people who let their daughter look my child in the face and tell him he didn't belong there. My coworker, a woman I've known since nursing school, sharp, no nonsense, someone who'd seen me cry in the break room exactly once and handed me coffee without making a big deal of it, had been telling me for months to stop the payments. "You're not obligated," she'd said. "You're not even married to him anymore. Why are you doing this?" I never had a good answer. Habit, maybe. Or that old fear that cutting people off makes you the villain. That night, I had my answer. I opened my banking app at a red light on the way home, navigated to the recurring transfer and canceled it, effective immediately. My hands weren't even shaking. The next morning started quietly. My son woke up and asked for pancakes and I made them, and we sat at our kitchen table in the early light and he showed me a loose tooth. And for maybe 20 minutes I forgot everything. Then my phone started. My mother-in-law called 4 times before 9 a.m. I let them go to voicemail. The 5th time I picked up. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't mention the dinner. She went straight to the money. "I see the transfer didn't come through," she said, her voice already hard. "Is something wrong with your account?" "No," I said. "I canceled it." The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then she told me I was selfish, that I was abandoning the family that had accepted me, that my son needed his grandparents and I was using him as a weapon. I listened to all of it. When she finished, I said, "I'll be in touch," and I hung up. My brother-in-law texted an hour later. Then my sister-in-law, the one from the dinner, sent a message that started with, "I hope you know what you're doing to this family." I didn't respond to any of them. My mother-in-law posted something on Facebook that afternoon, vague but pointed, something about how some people show their true colors when you need them most. 3 of my former neighbors liked it. A woman from my ex-husband's church sent me a private message asking if everything was okay, and I could tell from the phrasing she already thought she knew the answer. I went to work that evening and focused on my patients. I gave a 4-year-old her IV and held her hand while she cried and told her she was the bravest person I'd ever met. On my break, I sat in the parking lot and stared at the sky and thought about what it means to keep showing up for people who have already decided you're not enough. 2 weeks later, my coworker came to find me between rounds with an expression I'd never seen on her before. She closed the supply room door behind her. "I need to show you something," she said. "I wasn't going to say anything until I was sure, but I'm sure." She'd been helping a mutual friend navigate some financial paperwork, she explained. Something unrelated, and in the process she'd seen a document that made her stop cold. She'd recognized my name, my social security number, a credit card account opened 14 months ago, a card I'd never applied for, carrying a balance of just over $9,000. My mother-in-law had opened a credit card in my name. I sat down on a box of gauze pads and stared at the document my coworker had printed. There was my name, my SSN, my address from 2 years ago. The billing address was my mother-in-law's house in Hickson. The card had been used for groceries, utilities, what looked like a car repair, a plane ticket. "How did you get this?" I asked. "You don't want to know all the details," she said. "What matters is it's real and you need to act right now." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table after my son went to bed and went through every piece of financial documentation I could find. I called my bank's fraud line at midnight and sat on hold for 40 minutes, and then spoke to someone who was professionally calm in a way that made me feel like I might come apart at any moment. I filed a report. I flagged the account. I changed every password I had. At 2 in the morning, I made a list of every piece of evidence I could document and emailed it to myself 3 times. The next day, I called a consumer protection attorney. She was matter-of-fact in the way that people are when they do this work every day, and they've stopped being surprised by what families do to each other. She told me what I was looking at, what the process would be, and what I needed to do to protect myself. I did all of it. I gathered statements. I wrote out a timeline. I was organized in the way you get when you're operating on pure cold fury, and there's no room left for anything else. My mother-in-law called 3 times while I was in his attorney's office. I turned my phone face down on the desk and left it there. The credit card company launched their investigation. My attorney filed the necessary reports with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. I was told it could take several weeks. I went back to work. I made pancakes on Saturday mornings. I helped my son practice spelling his name in cursive. I did not tell anyone in that family what was coming, because I had learned, finally, that information is power, and I had given them too much of mine for too long. 6 weeks later, my attorney called me on a Tuesday morning while I was in the hospital parking lot about to start a shift. "They've concluded the investigation," she said. "The evidence is clear. Your mother-in-law opened the account fraudulently using your personal information. The card company is proceeding with a referral to law enforcement." I sat in my car for a moment. The sun was just coming up over the ridgeline east of the city. I thought about my son's face in that living room in March, the birthday card on the entryway table. "Okay," I said, "thank you." That evening, my mother-in-law called 7 times. Then my father-in-law called twice. Then my brother-in-law called. I let all of it go to voicemail, and then I sat down and listened to every message. My mother-in-law sounded nothing like she had in March. The hardness was gone. She was pleading, "Tell them it was a misunderstanding," she said. "Tell them you gave me permission. We can figure this out. We're family." My father-in-law was quieter, more defeated, just said he hoped I would think about what this meant for everyone. My brother-in-law was angry, then caught himself, then said something about how my son was going to grow up without his family because of my pride. I called my attorney, told her about the voicemails, and she advised me to save them all and not respond. I sent one text to my mother-in-law. It said, "I didn't give you permission. I'm not withdrawing anything. Please don't contact me again." Then I blocked her number. Then I blocked my father-in-law. Then my sister-in-law. Then my brother-in-law. I went through my Facebook friends list and removed them one by one, methodically, the way you clean a wound. Not with anger, just with the steady knowledge that this needed to be done. Word traveled fast in their circle. A cousin I'd met twice texted me to say she'd heard things were getting serious. My ex-husband's childhood friend sent me a Facebook message that said only, "Is it true?" I didn't answer either of them. A woman from my mother-in-law's church, someone I'd never spoken to directly, left a comment on an old photo of my son saying she was praying for the family. I deleted the comment and set my account to private. Within 2 months, I heard through my son's former babysitter, who remained the one neutral party in all of this, that my in-laws had put their house in Hickson on the market. That the car my mother-in-law drove, a white Chevy Tahoe she'd been extremely proud of, was gone. I felt something when I heard that, but it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was more like the strange, quiet feeling of seeing something finally make sense. They had built their comfort on borrowed things. Some of that was mine. In October, I came home from a night shift to find an envelope slipped under my apartment door. My mother-in-law's handwriting on the front, that slanted cursive I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists, and once, long ago, on a welcome card she'd given me the first time I visited their house as her son's girlfriend. I opened it, standing in my hallway in my scrubs. It was 2 pages. She and my father-in-law had written it together, or she had written it, and he had signed it. I couldn't tell. It was not an apology. It was a demand disguised as an explanation. She said she'd made mistakes, but I had overreacted. She said my son needed his grandparents. She said if I dropped the complaint, we could put this behind us and move forward as a family. She said there were things I didn't understand about the financial pressure they'd been under, implied that my stopping the monthly payments had forced her hand, as if 9,000 credit card fraud was a natural consequence of me finally keeping my own money. I read it twice. Then I photographed it, sent the photo to my attorney, and put the original in a folder with everything else. I didn't write back. I didn't call. I blocked the new number she'd clearly gotten to get around my block. I reported her new Facebook profile. She'd made another one and had it flagged. There was a period, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, where I questioned myself. Not whether I'd done the right thing, I was clear on that, but whether I'd been naive for so long, whether I should have she'd seen it sooner. I talked about it with my coworker over bad vending machine coffee in the break room, and she said something that I've turned over in my mind many times since. "You weren't naive," she said. "You were generous. Those aren't the same thing. They saw your generosity and they called it weakness. That's their failure, not yours." I had my son's parent-teacher conference that November. His teacher told me he'd been struggling a little at the start of the school year. Quieter than usual, not raising his hand as much, but that in the past month or 2 she'd seen him come back. He'd started volunteering answers again. He'd made a best friend, A kid named something I won't spell right, who apparently shared his deep passion for dinosaurs and the color orange. He'd drawn a picture for class, a house with two figures in front of it, both with yellow hair, labeled me and Mom in his careful handwriting. I cried in my car in the school parking lot for about 10 minutes. Then I drove home. In January, I got a call I hadn't let myself expect. A position I'd applied for months earlier, before any of this, a nurse supervisor role at a children's medical center in Nashville, a city I'd always loved, with better pay and a real step up, offered me the job. The timing felt almost too neat, the kind of thing that would seem contrived in a story, but it happened. I called my coworker from the parking lot of a Walgreens at 8 in the evening, standing in the cold, and she screamed loud enough that a man walking past me flinched. We moved in February. My son cried a little because of the dinosaur friend, but they exchanged emails. I set it up, and they have continued an apparently vigorous correspondence about paleontology to this day. Our new apartment in Nashville has a porch where he eats cereal in the mornings and watches the street below like he's responsible for it. He asked me last week if we could get a fish. I said yes. My attorney called in March to tell me the case had moved forward and that my mother-in-law was facing formal charges. I thanked her and sat with that for a while. I didn't celebrate. It was the right outcome, but it had cost something. Not in regret, but in the simple weight of how much time I'd spent on people who had been calculating things I didn't know about. That time was gone. I couldn't have it back. What I had instead was a porch, and a kid asking about fish, and work that meant something, and a friend who screamed in a Walgreens parking lot when good news arrived. Some nights I think about that birthday card my son made, the wobbly letters, the way he'd carried it in his backpack like something precious. I don't know if they ever looked at it. I don't know if they threw it away or if it got buried under coats on the entryway table and eventually made its way to a trash bag. It doesn't matter now. What matters is he made it. What matters is he made it for someone he believed loved him, because that is the kind of person he is. Generous, open, ready to love people who have not yet earned it. I want to protect that in him. I want to protect it fiercely, for as long as I can, and I want to show him by example that generosity doesn't mean tolerance for cruelty, that love doesn't mean accepting whatever people call love when they hand it to you. We are, the two of us, exactly enough, and I am done letting anyone convince us otherwise.